Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in DIFI this year. This is a yearly conference for everything related to a subject we're all interested in, and we're concerned about, which is about marriage. This is Hitmi Khalifa Al-Hitmi from Qatar University.
معك يا
I'm a
صديقي.
social media science influencer, and we will be talking today about, as I said, a subject that is very touchy, but as well very interesting. I think we're all concerned about. We're going to be talking today about canceling all of our marriages and never marry again. Definitely, that would be interesting, but for this day, we'll be talking about pre marriage tests, not marriage tests, pre marriage tests, and educational courses that can we take or we should, if it's effective. If it's not effective, we can take before marriage and will help us hopefully and reduce some of the problems caused after marriage. We have five intellectuals that will help us tackle these issues today. From Royal Holloway University of London, Dan Enderberg, um, Dr. Shafi Al-Hajari from Qatar University, دكتورة سهيلة غلوم دكتورة سهيلة غلوم from Hamad Medical Corporation, Hairul Akar from National Population and Family Development in Malaysia, and please correct me if I said it wrong, Balázs Molnar from
Perfect.
from Hungary, Kopp-Marie Institute for Demography and Families. Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to see you here. We'll start with دكتور شافي. مرحبا دكتور شافي، منور إن شاء الله اليوم.
مرحبا بك.
دكتور شافي، طبعا احنا ندري اليوم ان ممكن هل الحصص او الدورات اللي الاشخاص ممكن ياخذونها قبل الزواج ممكن انها تساعدهم، انها تخليهم تقلل مشاكلهم بعد الزواج، تساعدهم في امور معينه. احنا ندري بهالشيء، ولكن ليش اذا ندري انه يساعد، اذا هو فعلا يساعد، ليش مو قاعدين نطبقه في المدارس، نخليه ماده اساسيه، نعرضه على الناس اذا هو فعلا مثمر يعني.
طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. الوقت لي نفسه ال5 دقائق ولا؟
طبعا خذ راحتك.
طيب، نحن بالنسبة لنا في دولة قطر عندنا تجربة عملناها سابقا، وهي منظومة الثقافة الأسرية، وهذا منهج تعليمي شارك فيه مركز الاستشارات العائلية وفاق، وجزء من جامعة قطر، وكذلك يعني متخصصين بعض اخواننا في التربية. عمل منهج كامل لتدريب الشباب على الاستعداد للزواج، وهذا المنهج طبق في المدارس المستقلة سابقا. لما كانت المدارس المستقلة عندها بعض الحرية في التعامل مع بعض المناهج، اتخذ هذا الكتاب وهذه المنظومة لتدريس أو تثقيف وتدريب، يعني بلغة يعني أكثر دقة، لأنها هو ليس فقط تعليم معارف، إنما هو تدريب على قيم، وكذلك تدريب على مهارات، وفي نفس الوقت إعطاء معارف أولية من أجل تحصين الشباب ووقايتهم من الوقوع في الخطأ أو في الانحراف أو في المشاكل اللي تحدث غالبا تحدث في العالم لأسباب كثيرة ومتعددة. فنحن عندنا نعم.
وهل اثمرت هاي الدورات؟ يعني هل عندنا احصائيات تقول ان مثلا هذه فعلا غيرت واثرت وكذا، ولماذا توقفت لو توقفت؟
نعم، لا، هي لم تتوقف، هي ما زالت يعني سارية. للأسف الشديد إنه المركز أو المؤسسة الوحيدة اللي استمرت في تدريب المقبلين على الزواج هي مركز الاستشارات العائلية وفاق. بقية المؤسسات بدأت بداية قوية جدًا مؤثرة، لكنها كانت تتبع يعني القطاع الخاص أو المؤسسات الأهلية الخاصة، ولظرف ما توقفت هذه المؤسسة، وإلا كان فيه مشروع يعني ريادي قطري في مؤسسة الشيخ ثاني بن عبد الله، استمر تقريبًا 8 سنوات. وكان عندنا إحصائيات أنه تم تدريب أكثر من 1200 شاب وشابة قطريين، ونسبة الطلاق في هالعدد الكبير 3 حالات فقط، ولو أن هذه الحالات استمرت مع المركز أو أنه تدخل المشرفين على المركز يمكن كانت تقل هذه النسبة اللي هي 3 حالات من 2200. فمعنى ذلك
وهل
أن نحن عندنا تجارب في دولة قطر، تجارب رائدة، تجارب فاعلة، لكن للأسف الشديد أنها متوزعة، متناثرة، لا يوجد أي حبل يربط هذه المؤسسات. لذلك نحن الآن يعني متفائلين يعني خير أن المعهد هنا يتبنى مثل هذه المؤسسات، ورئيسة المعهد كانت ضمن الفريق اللي اشتغل في هذه المنظومة، دكتورة شريفة العمادي كانت ضمن المنظومة التي اشتغلت وتبنت يعني كثير من المؤسسات التعليمية ومؤسسات المجتمع المدني لأفكار هذه المنظومة. وبفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى كان فيه وعي، أنا أقول فيه وعي ويعني تحصين لجزء كبير من الشباب. لكن إن لم يكن هناك قانون يلزم يعني المتقدمين على الزواج بهذه الدورات، ونحن نرى اليوم أنها ضرورية جدا جدا، بسبب أن الآن نحن لا نستطيع أن نتحكم في أسرنا من داخلها فقط. الآن الفضاء مفتوح، الفضاء الثقافي، الفضاء السياسي، الفضاء الاجتماعي، الفضاء حتى النفسي. فكيف أن نحن نضع خطة واضحة المعالم؟ هذه الخطة مدعومة بقانون. نحن عندنا قانون الأسرة يلزم الأسر قبل الزواج أن تأخذ فحص الطبي، وهذه خطوة رائدة، وإن كان في بعض الثغرات اللي ممكن تعالج في المستقبل. الخطوة
يعطيك ألف
الأخرى،
عافية. نعم.
نعم، الخطوة الأخرى يا هتمي فقط أن
تفضل.
نحن نلزم المتزوجين مثل ما ألزمناهم بالفحص الطبي، نلزمهم كذلك بأخذ الدورات التوعوية.
طبعا هالدورات ان شاء الله نشوفها تزيد وبنتكلم عنها اكثر ان شاء الله في المستقبل. نشوف ننتقل حق دان. Hi Dr. Dan. Welcome here today in the IFI. So, as we all know from the latest studies that marriage have been declining steadily, especially in first world countries. It's been declining. There is a stigma about issues concerned with marriage. There is domestic violence inside homes. People don't want to get married anymore because they feel, um, we all know someone who has troubled family and causes. It's not a comfortable situation to be in, especially for the kids, especially for both couples. Have been there any policies that have been implemented by some institutions around the world that can, tackle the issues or reduce the problem? Is there any studies that shed light on that?
Uh, First of all, let me say thank you for having me, for inviting me to this conference. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you, to this audience. I'm also very happy about the introduction to domestic violence. I think it is a particularly pertinent question to look at in the context of marriage, for several key reasons. One being, domestic violence in a sense represents a violation of a basic right to a safe home environment. But also more broadly, that we kind of have by now we have a better sense of what are potential triggers and causes of domestic violence. There's more clear in the data than we can see for divorce, which is a bit more diffuse. And also in terms of the consequences of domestic violence, those are now clear in the data in terms of impact on well-being and development and so on. There's, of course, the two are related, divorce and domestic violence. Having, for example, the divorce rates among couples characterized by domestic violence we know is about 5 to 10 times larger than it is for couples that are not characterized by domestic violence. So there's clearly a link, although the two are not the same. They're not identical. One reason why I think it's particularly interesting and important to look at domestic violence is that we have a better understanding of the impact, not least on children. That's something where research has made large progress in the last 10, 15 years. It's really to understand, map out the impact that domestic violence has on children's cognitive and social emotional skill development. Now, in terms of policies, so looking at one thing what is really interesting to think about domestic violence is to look at patterns, because patterns tell you a lot about triggers and causes. If you want to have policies that tackle these things, you need to understand the triggers and causes to start with. So there are a couple of key patterns that always stand out in the data. One is that it is particularly common among young couples. It is particularly common around key events such as job loss, childbirth, other sort of stressful events. Those are kind of two key observations. The second key observations would be in relation to how it is intergenerationally transmitted. We see that often men who grew up in abusive households are more likely to go on to become abusers themselves and so on. So what this kind of suggests is ultimately that you find the triggers and causes among sort of a lack of an ability to handle stressful situations. That's a clear pattern. And second, a sort of more sort of toxic culture at the family level of acceptance of abuse, which is often seen to be sort of associated with a lack of an understanding of the consequences of the own actions on for example, children's outcomes. So.
But Dan, from what many, at least there is a stereotype that there is or actually it's a question: is there a relationship between mental health and mental health and domestic violence or marriage instability? My question is: are all couples who causes domestic violence, who causes marriage instabilities, are psychos?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think there's a very strong role. I mean, a lot of this session is about premarital education, and I think that's more what one should think about. I mean, to a lot of extent, what we see in research is two sort of clear sort of misperceptions and misunderstandings among especially young people who enter marriage. One is a misunderstanding of the impact of their own actions. So this is something that we can see in the research, where we see, for example, we observe studies where we provide people with information about this is the consequences of your actions, or we can do this in randomized control trial. And when you explain to people what the negative consequences of what they do, they often learn from that. So that's sort of one area where there's a clear role for education, is to make people understand the consequences of their actions. The second part, I was going to come to that. I think it's really important. This is really fascinating. When we're looking at perceptions about gender roles, one often, most recent evidence suggests quite strongly that men often misperceive how strong how weak the male norm is. In the sense that men tend to be more privately supportive of wives than they expect other men to be. So in some sense, men expect a stronger male culture than the male culture seems to actually be at the household level. And that's something that is really important, because that means you can unpick and say there isn't such a strong support for a male-based culture as you might have thought, and to kind of allow people to expect that can really make a difference.
Okay, that is really great, and of course there are a lot of a lot of issues that is related to domestic violence and marriage instability. Um, Dr. Sohail Agloum, thank you for being with us today, and it's a question of two parts. So we know we have today in Qatar um, biological physical tests before marriage that have shown results in decreasing hereditary diseases among a lot of population. However, do we know if a lot of marriage instability, increasing divorce rates, is related to mental illnesses? And if that's the case, why don't we do these tests now? Why don't we do it before marriage? Or have it been done actually outside of Qatar or anywhere in the world?
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you for hosting me, actually, to begin with. Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, which is, do we know if the figures suggest that a lot of the cases of divorce are related to mental health? I'm not aware of such data. And in fact, that is a very important question, because I think before we start talking about the importance of premarital screening for mental health, we need to know such figures. So we need to know to what extent are cases of divorce because of mental illness. And we have to be cautious in differentiating, not mixing the moral with the mental. So people with personality problems, for example, or someone who is aggressive by nature, someone who, like Dan was saying, was subject to or was brought up in a violent environment, and therefore he or she are now violent. Let's not mix between these personality characteristics and the presence of mental illness. They're not the same. So the term that you used, which I tend to disagree with in mental health, the psycho term, this is more referred to people with personality issues. So people who are aggressive, who are antisocial, but they don't necessarily have mental illness. So we have to be very cautious about that. In terms of screening, again, I'm not aware of any country that does premarital screening for mental health. So there are the screening for the biological hereditary disorders. Mental health is not all, or mental illness is not all biological and not all hereditary. So it depends on the condition, and we know that a big factor is hereditary, absolutely, for cases like schizophrenia, for example, bipolar disorder, but not all. And hereditary is not the only explanation, because it doesn't explain why one individual might have schizophrenia while their brother or sister might not, because there are other factors, environmental, social, upbringing factors that come into play, and stressful situations that also contribute to the development of mental illness. So most of the screening, there are screening instruments available. These tend to measure, they're either for diagnostic purposes within a clinical care setting, or there are some that are public health screening instruments, like it's called the PHQ, the Public Health Questionnaire. It's very brief, a few questions only. It doesn't tell you that this person has a diagnosable mental illness. It says that they have certain features that may indicate mental illness. But if you want to apply that for premarital screening, it becomes very complicated, because we're talking about prevalence of mental illness. I'll talk about here in Qatar. We know the prevalence is 1 in 5. So are we suggesting that 1 in 5 people, sorry?
Wow, it's a big number.
It is 1 in 5. In some countries, it's actually higher. I mean, the average internationally is between 1 in 4, 1 in 6 even. I'm sorry, 1 in 3 to 1 in 5. So, we are within the international range. But are we going to screen all of these people? And if all of them are found out to have some features suggestive of mental health issues, then what's the consequence of that? So it becomes a very tricky situation, in fact.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Suhail. Of course, I was trying to go against the social norm of when we're sick, we go to the hospital, we can feel that we're sick, but we don't tend to get screening for mental illnesses. So there is a social norm that I'm not a psycho, I don't want to do this, but it's totally normal. It could be hereditary, it's totally fine to
Absolutely.
get from it. Um, However, now we will have a poll from the audience. We want to ask them a question. If you were presented, if you found out that there is a premarital educational course, would you attend it? Would you be interested in attending it to learn more about marriage? We want you to tell us if you would like to attend it or not. So we'll give you 1 to 2 minutes to answer this poll, and we'll see the results from the audience. So, from what we know, that in Qatar, as we talked, we have in Qatar we have the physical examination, which is mandatory. In many countries, it's not mandatory. And here, it's mandatory. I know in some other countries it is very mandatory. In Malaysia, for an example, they have a mandatory premarital courses that couple before they get married, or as far as I know, before they get married, correct me if I'm wrong, they need Dr. Harold from Malaysia. Can you tell us please more about these premarital courses? How long how long Malaysia been doing them, and have they been proven effective?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to provide a brief background of Malaysia before sharing more on our experiences in implementing a premarital program in Malaysia. Malaysia has a population of around 32.8 million. Malaysia is a multiracial country with 65% of the population are Muslim. Malaysia family laws are divided into three systems, which are Sharia family law, civil family law, and native law for native people in Malaysia. There are about nearly 150,000 registration of Muslim marriages and 55,000 non-Muslim marriages in a year. So the first element that constitute premarital education that I would like to share with all of you is premarital education as prerequisite procedure to register marriage. For Muslim couple who are about to get married, they need to undergo a premarital course as a prerequisite procedures to register their marriage under the Sharia family law. Failing to do so, they could not register their marriage. Muslim marriage they are not registered will be fined under the Sharia family law. However, for the non-Muslim, the civil family law does not prerequisite premarital education to be completed by the couples, but instead it was introduced on voluntary basis by the government agency, NGOs, and also religious bodies. The second element is enriching the content of premarital education. The premarital education for registration of marriage under the Sharia law in Malaysia consists of 2 days mandatory course. The implementation of this course was started in 1997 with the fundamental element of the course teaches about understanding of Islam, Islamic jurisprudence on family law, fiqh munakahat in marriage, rights and responsibility of husband and wife, family contract on the responsibility of both husband and wife, as well
And
as
Hero,
mutual respect and communication.
have there been
Yes.
studies that prove that these courses have actually decreased, let's say, domestic violence, divorce rates, marriage instability in general after these courses been implemented?
There are various scientific research that indicate marriage education are effective and have impacted the life of married couple. For example, a study on the effectiveness of prepare program with premarital couples in 2002 document the effectiveness of premarital inventory questionnaires and counseling in preventing marital distress. This approach yielded a 52% increase in the number of couples classified as most satisfied with their relationship. Among the remaining couples, more than half improved their assessment of their relationship. Among the highest risk couples, more than 80% moved up into a more positive category. This finding is reported by Luke Luxon and David H. Olson and published in Journal Review. Another scientific research on the effectiveness of marriage and relationship education program in 2007 showed a marriage and relationship education program led to couple reporting higher relationship satisfaction and commitment and less conflict and chance for divorce. This is reported by Robin Parker in Family Matters, Volume 77. From our experiences in Malaysia, the pre and post evaluation of our Smart Start premarital courses in 2011, which is implemented on voluntary basis to more than 8,500 couples, indicate 36% most satisfied and 62% satisfied with the program. Satisfied that the program has increased their knowledge and skill in marriage, with less than 2% less satisfied with the content of the program. Another
Thank you.
survey finding in 2019. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. Because we did a poll about people attending, if they would attend the premarital courses, and apparently around 80% of our audience said they would actually go to these courses. It is mandatory, compulsory in Malaysia. However, we have people from around the world that would love to go to these courses, even after marriage. I think you can take a premarital courses after marriage. Maybe you'll learn something you haven't learned before. Thank you so much, Tahir. Now we heard from the UK, from Qatar, and from Malaysia. We want to talk a little bit about Hungary. Welcome, Balázs Molnár from Hungary, Maria Kopp Institute. Thank you for being with us today, and we want you to tell us, please, more about the policies, what is happening in Hungary, and how are such issues we talked about today here are tackled.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here among us, and heard very exciting news from around the world, and I certainly would like to share with you some Hungarian experience. Maybe for understanding how actually Hungarians relate to marriage, let us quote some polls we have at hand. In 2017, we had a family and career study that revealed that college students do not regard marriage as an absolute institution. 89% of them have marriage plans. And according to the Central Statistic Office, the vast majority of young people, 90%, express confidence that they will have children in their life. When we our institute asked Hungarians in childbearing ages that what are the main driving factors when deciding about having children or how many children actually a family has, the first and most important factor had been regarded as a stable relationship. The second one, the solidity of occupation, so work. And the third one was an adequate housing, an adequate home. So as marriage is indeed the most stable relationship, and we know from several research that married people do receive more children than only cohabiting ones. Supporting marriage in this sense is indeed supporting population growth. Hungary has a population problem. We are a shrinking population as of 1981. So it is a very important question. And as Hungarians expressed their will for quite some decades now that they would wish to receive more children than they actually do throughout their young ages, we would like to close this gap, and it is a very important policy to close this gap between wanted children, wish children, and the actual born ones. So most of the family benefits of Hungary naturally is open to single parents, to cohabiting parents, to married ones, but there are some programs that target only married couples. One is that we have a family taxation in place in Hungary since 2010. It has tax cuts for the number of children. We will introduce a tax cut as of next year for all those who are under 25. They will not have to pay personal income tax. And we have one other family taxation matter in place that any mother who has given birth to 4 or more children throughout her life is exempted from paying any personal income tax as of last year. And we have one family taxation for newlywed couples. Any newlywed couple may reduce their income tax monthly by €20, roughly €20 for the first 2 years of their marriage. It's just a little financial help when young people do get together. There is no age limit in this one. There is though a larger program, which is one of the 7 points of a family protection action plan in force since 2019, and this is the so-called subsidy for young married couples. A couple of words about that. It targets only married couples, as I've said. The wife has to be between the ages of 18 and 40, and they are eligible for a general purpose loan of maximum €30,000. And when this couple has a child, then the repayment will be suspended for 3 years. If this couple has a second child, then the repayment will be suspended for another 3 years, and 30% of the outstanding debt will be taken over by the state. And in case this young married couple has a third child, then the entire remaining outstanding sum will be taken over by the state. So actually, in case in the next 10 years this one couple has 3 children, it can practically be an interest-free benefit. So it can be from loan, it can be turned to benefit. But even in case you don't have 3 children, this is a very favorable possibility. It's a general purpose loan, so practically you can use it as an own share for buying a house. You can start a business from it. There is no real attachment to whatever. We have quite some schemes for buying new houses, building new houses, or buying used property. But in this program, it's very important that we are not attaching any obligation to the family. They can spend this money on whatever they would wish to do. In this sense, we believe that civil society initiatives are very important as well. If we look at, for example, the Week of Marriage, which it just passed, it started from England, it is present in 4 continents now. It draws attention to the positivity of living in families, living in families with children. We have discussed about the premarital education.
And you said something very important, which is Hungary is a shrinking population, and I think most develop most countries, at least in the last 10 to 15 years, have been implementing a lot of policies. But however, the population has been shrinking. I know, for an example, in Qatar, the population, the fertility rate is below 2, which is considered a shrinking population. I would like Suhaila to tell us more. Do you think that implementing such policies or mental illness tests or any of these courses might actually turn people away, or it might decrease fertility rate, decrease marriage in general? might affect the population in a way.
Yeah, I think, okay, so introducing courses that encourage or teach how to communicate within a marital relationship, that teach principles of a marital relationship, expectations, courses that explore compatibility between the different personalities and how to bring the gap closer, I think that would be useful. Generally, personally, I'm against anything that is mandatory because I think people have the choice, but if they are offered all these courses and they can choose to go to them or not. And like you said yourself, sometimes it's more important to do them after a marriage starts because, I think usually the first year of marriage tends to be the hardest, especially in our context with the arranged marriage. People don't know each other, so they get to know each other within this first year. So if these courses are offered after marriage, that would be useful. In terms of screening, I would worry a lot more if it was mandatory for mental illness because it will push people away from marriage. It will push people away from seeking mental health when they need it, mental health help, because they don't want anything to be registered, so to speak. And we have electronic medical records that are made access to information easier among the healthcare sector, including at premarital screening facilities. And that can push people away. We know statistically that here in Qatar, among the Qataris, it's less than 1 in 4 of those who need mental health help are seeking that help. So in fact, the majority of those who need it are not seeking it, or they may be seeking it abroad or in private sector. By introducing something like that, we are likely to see even a lower figure of those who need help actually seeking it. And I think we may end up with more problems related to people avoiding marriage, and therefore there are all the other consequences of that can happen, or seeking to get married elsewhere, unofficially, maybe informally. All of these consequences that can be more risky to the society, I think. So I would say these issues need to be more carefully considered, and we need to listen to people with lived experience, those with mental health, and what are the challenges they face. We see examples in our practice. I have personally seen a couple of patients, and some colleagues have spoke to me about cases they have seen of people who had a note from psychiatry a few years back for a brief anxiety episode, a brief phobic episode, something mild. But when they went for premarital screening, it was discovered, it was found out, and they were told that they need to inform the partner. So they decided, okay, no, I don't want to do that because stigma in this part of the world is extremely high.
It's a question that rises to my head, and I bet a lot of the audience think about that. When do someone feel they're ready to get married? What tells the readiness of marriage? Is it something physical, or is it something mental? Is it something economical?
I think it's a combination. There are societal issues, there are cultural issues, there are family factors. So, in our culture, it's usually the family who encourages someone once they have got to university level, sometimes even before employment, because the state offers a lot of support for people when they get married at a young age. So, and definitely, as soon as they have started work, then the family tends to put pressure to start getting married. And that repeated kind of pressure gradually gets into their mind and they say, okay, let me get married. With girls, it's at a much earlier age. So once they hit high school age, then they are considered eligible age-wise now to consider marriage. So we do have marriages at a very young age in this part of the world. Certainly financial stability, financial support makes a big difference, and the state is offering that, so that's a good factor. Housing is a big factor, and here again, in our part of the world, the states do offer housing support or homes. We have the larger family, and people tend to, at a young age when they've just got married, to stay with the family. So we have all the factors that, or a lot of the factors that prepare a young couple for marriage. Whether they are mentally or psychologically ready, that's another factor. So a lot of times they take, the finances and the housing and materialistic things into consideration without being mature enough necessarily to take that step.
Thank you, Suhaila. I'm really enjoying this. However, we're running out of time. It's a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I think all of the audience learned a lot. I have a question للدكتور شافي. دكتور شافي، شنو تشوف السياسات أو الشغلات اللي ممكن الدولة تسويها أو المنظمات تسويها إنها تزيد من نسبة الإنجاب؟ إحنا اليوم عندنا في قطر مثلا، وأغلب الدول الحديثة المتطورة عندها نسبة الإنجاب قاعدة تقل إذا ما كانت already قليلة جدا يعني. فشنو الأشياء اللي ممكن تسويها السياسات أو المنظمات عشان تزيد هالشيء؟ وهل في شيء قاعد يصير؟
أنا ما أتصور أن عندنا يعني إشكالية في نقص يعني أعداد البنين أو أعداد الأطفال، لكن المشكلة الآن أنه كيف نتعامل مع هؤلاء. الآن اختلف الوضع، نحتاج إلى إعادة نظر في هذه السياسات، إعادة النظر في البرامج التي تقدم، إعادة النظر في القوانين. حتى القوانين الآن، قانون الأسرة يحتاج إعادة النظر في بعض الجزئيات. نحن نريد الآن أنه المحاكم دليل، مركز استشارات العائلية دليل، عزوف الشباب يعني في جزء كبير منه بعض الضغوط اللي موجودة الآن، مالية أو وظيفية أو أسرية، كلها موجودة. لكن كيف نحن نقدم برامج ممتدة مثل ما قالت الدكتورة سهيلة، يعني ليس فقط قبل الزواج، حتى بعد الزواج. وإذا كان يعني أنه المجتمع وفر المتخصصين بكفاية أو يعني بعدد يعني كافي للمجتمع، أنها يعني يستطيع أنها في أي وقت أنه يجلس مع المستشار أو يكلم المستشار أو المتخصص في أي جزء مهم جدا في جوانب الأسرة، عندئذ يكون نحن يعني نسلك الطريق الصحيح. يعني الآن رؤية قطر 2030 وتطبيقاتها الخمسية، يعني كل 5 سنوات فيه إعادة لتقييم هذه الرؤية. لذلك نحن بحاجة بالدرجة الأولى إلى التوعية، إلى الثقافة، إلى توفير القيم المهمة جدا التي تحفظ الأسرة من التفكك، تحفظ الأسرة من الشتات، تحفظ الأسرة من الفوضى. نحن نواجه إشكاليات كبيرة جدا، في جزء منها داخلي جزء منها خارجي، فنحتاج إلى وعي، نحتاج إلى قوانين، نحتاج إلى نظم واضحة، ثقافات واضحة، سياسات واضحة. بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى نستطيع إن شاء الله أن نحن نعبر يعني الإشكاليات الكبيرة اللي على الأقل يعني ما تعمل شرخ كبير في الأسرة، ولا كل أسرة عندها مشاكل وعندها يعني خلافات، لكن أن يكون هناك شروخ، أن تكون نسبة الطلاق عالية جدا، أن تكون مثلا العنف الأسري يعني بدل ما هو يعني يحاصر يمتد، الطلاق بدل ما هو يحاصر يمتد، والطلاق لا، هو شرع ليكون حلا لا لأن يكون مشكلة. لذلك هذه القضية تحتاج إلى رؤية متكاملة، ونحن متفائلون إن شاء الله أنه يعني في المستقبل تكون يعني المؤسسات على قدر كبير من هذا الوعي بإذن الله.
يعطيك العافية. Thank you all. وشكرا Dr. Shafi. Thank you all for talking in this conference. We learned a lot from you. Thank you for being with us today again. Hopefully, in the future, we will see less domestic violence, more marriage stability, as long as we have better families and we keep everything steady going. Thank you all for being here. Today we talked about, in this session, we talked about premarital educational courses and tests. However, many families are not as united as we all have the pleasure to be in. Some of them work in different countries. The next session will be talking about that. Please be with us, and thank you for listening to all of us. Thank you all, and see you next year.